Kia ora, Aotearoa, and hello world. You are listening to the Yeah Nah podcast, the official podcast of the New Zealand Skeptics. I'm Bronwyn Rideout, and with me are one of my co-hosts, Mark Honeychurch.
Hello.
Katrina Borthwick is not joining us this week, but she will be back in a fortnight. But in her place, it's a very warm welcome back to Anke Richter. She has been, well, what can we say, Anke? You've been on our podcast a few times before talking about Decult, but now you are freshly back from the International Cultic Studies Conference, and you got some big news for us.
Yeah, it's great to be back actually, even though it's winter here, and I had a bit of sunshine in California, which was nice. Also had a taste, if I could just, going a little tangent, of July 4th, 250 years of America celebrating. And I mean, I was surrounded by so many American flags, and I bumped into a woman wearing a t-shirt, Woman of God. And so, yeah, it was a lot to take in. But then I was with the good people from the Cultiverse at the ICSA conference in San Diego. And I have to say, I think it was the fourth conference that I've attended so far. And that was the best one so far, because just the quality of speakers, I think they weeded out some of the more problematic people in their program. It just felt, dare I say, it felt more like the Decult conference. Maybe there's been some great cross-pollination, but now I think, jokes aside, the real reason I think is that they've got a fantastic new leadership team, US lawyer, the cult assassin Carol Murchison as president, Jackie Johnson, who manages things. And yeah, I'm just super impressed with what they've pulled off this year, and happy to tell you more because it has been exciting.
We definitely want to hear a bit more. And you also came away with an award for Decult, the Margaret T. Singer Award.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm totally thrilled and honored, and, with my imposter syndrome of not, I'm not an academic, yeah, I feel like I'm an outlier as a journalist, and also, this award is really for, not so much for my journalism, but it is actually for starting Decult. It is really for pulling off this small not-for-profit, running with its idea, having a success with it, I guess, and being recognized for this effort. So it's not just for me, it really is for our whole team, for our volunteers, I guess for everyone who also came to the last conference and made it so special. So yeah, I think it's a moment actually for us here in New Zealand to celebrate that we're being recognized for what we're doing here.
It's pretty awesome that, being such a small out-of-the-way place, that you've still been able to arrange a world-class conference with amazing speakers. And obviously at the last conference, there were some great speakers. I loved the talks that I sat in on. So many engaging people with very passionate stories. Often heartbreak and, abuse and all sorts, but the fact that they're brave enough to stand up and stand against these cults and talk out loud, it's great to hear. Can you give us a little bit of an insight as to who we might be seeing at this year's Decult conference?
I'm also happy to tell you more about ICSA, but let's just take the opportunity because, hey, if I can plug what we're doing, fantastic. So, first speaker release, the others are coming later, but first speaker release, super exciting, is that we're going to have US cult expert, one of the worldwide cult experts, and there aren't that many. Her name is Rachel Bernstein. She's a therapist in Los Angeles. It has been working and is still working on a lot of interventions with interventionists. She also ran a cult clinic for over a decade. She's involved with trainings for cult therapists. So she's joining us as our keynote speaker, and that's super exciting. And she's also going to offer workshops here in New Zealand, in Auckland, and then one evening, which is less of a workshop, more like a sort of public event for anybody. But workshop in Auckland and evening in Wellington with the Olive Leaf Network. Fantastic for people who have been at Decult or can't come to Decult and live in those cities and want to get more specialized input, or maybe even do a short training with her. So that's exciting. And the other person, and I know that you're happy about that too, is the fantastic Dr. Christine Marie. She's the psychologist from Utah, who many of us know now from the Netflix documentary hit series, Trust Me, the False Prophet. And she's this petite lady in pink. And at first, when I started watching Doctor, I thought, who's this person in this, with these moments in this community and all of frills and her cowboy boots and what's she gonna? Hang on, she's a cult expert and she's what's happening here? And then by the end, and I guess everyone who's watched the doco understands what she's been doing. It's incredible. She's actually basically, in a very sort of badass manner, helped to bring down a child sexual abuser and his mini polygamous cult and his underage wives. Anyway, I highly recommend watching it. And Christine Marie has confirmed she's coming to New Zealand as well. I just met her at ICSA. We hung out a little bit, and that's super exciting. And also what I like, it's not just that she has done this incredible work that you can see, in undercover work, basically, that you can see in the documentary, but she's also a media psychologist. So her PhD is about dignity of survivors in the media, because she's a survivor herself and she has been publicly shamed, and that's actually caused her so much trauma that she's made this her initial cause before, we learned about the FLDS there in Utah and what she's been doing for them. So those are two people. I can also, I think it's okay to also give away that Carol Murchison, the ICSA president and cult assassin lawyer, will also be joining us. And there's actually quite a bunch of people from America, which I'm really excited about. And I ran into them all or most of them, at the ICSA conference in San Diego. So that was also great to compare notes and see how the momentum is building and how people are excited. And I went to so many really good sessions. I discovered another expert who I've always had on my radar, but I've never heard him talk before, and that's Daniel Shaw, and he's a specialist on traumatic narcissism. And I think, Bronwyn, you will appreciate that, because I sat there taking notes for someone who has left Hayden Temple in New Zealand recently.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, all this applies. And I thought, Bruce Lyon, obviously, from where I'm sitting, fits the bill of the traumatic narcissist. So there's now a whole book out by Daniel Shaw people can read and come to their own conclusions, and maybe it helps them to unpack what they've gone through and how they're feeling now, and the sort of shame and the grief of the lost years and all that. So there was just so much over the 4 days. I was also, oh my God, a real highlight was also bumping into connecting with some incredible filmmakers. Do you guys remember the 2000 film Kumare?
Yes.
That would be a favorite of yours, right? But guess what? Kumare was there. Vikram Gandhi was there, the filmmaker himself. And I wish I'd clocked that a bit earlier, that it was him, and I would have grabbed, a photo and whatnot. But he was there, and he was shooting a film about one of the speakers who is a cult leader's daughter, and she gave a fantastic session. We also heard from the Olive Leaf Network, and there was a really great panel with survivors from the Children of God, which was super impressive. Then we had, there was just so much. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, because that's a pretty big one, because for many, many years at ICSA, there's been Eileen Barker, who's actually a really major cult apologist, like kind of up there with Massimo.
I know, and guess what? She wasn't there this year.
Really?
Yay, progress. So I think that is progress that she wasn't in the program. She would have been welcome to be there. I don't think the issue is her being there, anyone being there. There are possibly even people from cults there who are spying. This is why some people don't want to be photographed even from the back, or, the very strict rules around privacy. Some people don't even wear name tags. But yeah, Eileen Barker wasn't there, and she certainly wasn't in the program. And I think that was, one of these sort of sticky points over the last few years, where people, including me, have spoken up about just giving someone a platform who has a pretty bad track record of enabling or whitewashing cults. And I know there are people even in our close networks who have a different view in that, and they say, yeah, but even someone like Eileen Barker has been important to help get people out, because she can be a door opener, or she has a foot in the door. She can talk maybe to someone on the inside where the activists and interventionists don't have access. And so I appreciate that too, but I still don't think we need people. So I think there's been a real noticeable shift. And also the spokesperson from the Hare, I went to his talk last year in Montreal, and because I didn't even quite clock that, is the Hare Krishna PR. I thought, there's a session about reforming an organization from within. This is right up my alley because of, Bronwyn, because of the whole ISTA and 3SC and, mediation efforts there. And then I was quite disappointed. But then, I've also heard that this guy has been doing things on the inside that maybe wouldn't have happened. So, you kind of have to appreciate the small steps of better to reduce harm than not, right? So if it's about harm reduction, yeah, good to do these things, but also should a CULT conference really feature someone who is part of a slightly problematic cultic group that hasn't really done its full accountability? So these discussions were everywhere. I mean, this is still an ongoing debate, but I think what I at least also appreciate, because I was on a panel on the last day, and it was about cross-collaboration, what's sort of needed in the field, and it was an honor for me to be on there. I think the effort, or the reason why this panel was also because there is a lot of, I wouldn't say competition, but there are a lot of strong opinions in this small field of cult advocacy, and anti-cult activism, cult research. And sometimes I think it's hard to just let each other be, from what I've observed. It can be a bit culty, like, there's only one truth, there's only one way. So there's some people who don't even want to use the word religious trauma because they think that's not really a thing, or it's kind of made up. And then I went to a fantastic session, just quickly plugging him because he might be in our program, and that's Andrew Jesko. You would have loved it. He did a whole session about religious trauma, and it was a bit provocative, lots of Bible quotes to prove that God is actually a narcissist. And it was smart. But then I stood outside with some people, and they said, we feel like that, we could have just come out of the Kingdom Hall at the Jehovah's Witnesses with Bible quotes, because you can prove anything with Bible quotes. There are different approaches. There are different people on the spectrum. We definitely had someone in the audience, I noticed, who was always huffing and huffing and puffing when these kind of remarks about religion were made, because clearly he's a Christian, but also obviously wants, doesn't want his church to turn into a cult. Made lots of new connections. Wish I could have just told more people to come to speak at Decult, but as you know, our program is on our committee, right? For those
yes.
who know, big shout out to Bronwyn, because you've done so much there to sort through these 85 speaker proposals.
That's a lot of proposals. How many of those were good quality, and how many were just maybe, obvious from the get-go that they were not going to make the cut?
It's hard. It's really hard, because one of the things that you see in cults is that it's detrimental to education. It's detrimental to how people can express themselves. And I think there's probably a lot of survivors who could have done probably really great talks, but, it's a little bit untested to take someone who probably has never done public speaking and put them in front of a group of 300 very, very sympathetic and very empathetic audience. But that level of exposure can be quite shocking.
Yeah.
That is so true. And we took the risk last time. We didn't have a committee back then. It was pretty much more sort of me looking around, handpicking people and asking them, would you like to be a speaker? And maybe having a Zoom call beforehand, but also not knowing how are they going to be on stage? How are they coping? And we're really lucky that the quality of speakers and how they held themselves and the sort of bravery of their voices was just, that's really what made the event. So hopefully we're going to see that again. But like you said, sometimes it's a bit hard to tell just from a proposal who's behind it if you don't know them, but at the same time we don't want to just go with what's already out there. It's also great to discover new people and find some new angles and maybe add something to this canon of cult research voices that's fresh, right? So that's the big thing about Decult 2026, is that we will have, I would say, 99% of new speakers in the program. We're not rehashing old sessions, but hey, you can be sure that a cult like Gloriavale will be covered again with new speakers. We'll have another highly problematic New Zealand homegrown cult in the mix. Maybe I'll wait a little bit until I say which one, but people can, make their guesses. Yep, we will have panels from sexuality and gender in cults to Christian nationalism and tradwives to healing families or Māori in cults. So it's going to be a really good mix, I think, of topics, and then some very interesting presentations. So the program is probably only going live closer to the time, like maybe late August, September or so, but we will do the odd speaker drop. And 20th of July, our tickets are live. So early bird tickets are live. People can go online, go to decult.net or find us on Humanities and grab your ticket. Last time we sold out. This time we're in a bigger venue. We've also got an extended online program for US, the American time zones, and also one for the European time zone. So all up, I mean, we're looking at like 70 speakers or so and like a round-the-clock program, which is quite ambitious, but I think we can pull it off.
I think my favorite part of the last Decult was probably the story jam. Like, some of the stories there were amazing. And we talked earlier about some of the speakers that won't, or potential speakers that won't make the grade, who haven't been able to be included. Please tell me you're doing the story jam again, because I guess for a lot of those people, it gives them 5 minutes in order to tell their story briefly on stage.
Well, you're in for a treat, Mark. Of course we're going to have the story jam again, and I think we're going to extend it because it was our most watched and most appreciated session last time.
Awesome.
I've already got quite a few people in the lineup. We're not confirmed, but sort of on my list. There will be someone with a song again, and we might have someone from the Doomsday Comedy Tour that you might have even watched in Wellington. So it's going to be great. And I think now that people also know what we're doing and they can watch the Decult documentary online. That's on YouTube for those who haven't really heard about us before, don't know what we're doing, or wondering if it's worth coming to Christchurch for this. Go online, watch Decult Voices Beyond Belief on YouTube. We showed that I showed that at my session at the ICSA conference as well. Unfortunately, they had a little technical failure and the sound wasn't really working in the room. The room was full, so there was so much interest in what we're doing here in New Zealand, I guess. And still everyone stayed to watch the doco with subtitles and really, really low sound. So that showed me, there's some real good interest in there. And even though the sound was so crap, people really got it. And they watched part of the story jam and the documentary. And yeah, there was a lot of emotions in the room. I could tell. So yeah, Mark, I'm glad you liked the story jam too, because I did, and we're going to do it again. And it's going to be even bigger, I think.
Nice.
I kind of want to turn the conversation actually kind of back to ICSA, because as you just mentioned, you had your own session. You were also invited to talk on a panel. And I'm kind of interested, everyone stayed for the Beyond for that doco. What has been the response at ICSA to what you've accomplished in New Zealand?
Well, I mean, the biggest response obviously is that the ICSA jury decided to give us an award, which I received, the Margaret T. Singer Award. And Margaret Singer was a pioneering cult researcher, psychologist. Actually, her book, Cults in Our Midst, was one of the first cult books I ever read. And then back then, I mean, I could have never imagined that one day I would receive an award in her name. So it really is a huge honor. And for me, especially as an outlier, and I've only been doing this sort of advocacy work, obviously not my journalism that's been going for longer, but the Decult work is only in its third years. I feel it's a real recognition, but also I see it almost as if they're investing in us, like they believe in us, they believe in that this is a good thing. And it is really what keeps me going, because we still don't have any major funding. We are sort of staring down the barrel of how long can we keep going? Is there going to be another Decult conference? What's going to happen next year? All of that. So this award really makes a difference, even though it's nothing to be monetized. It doesn't come with any funding or so, but it's just it really helps for others to see what we're doing, and also for me, and I guess for our whole team, to believe in what we're doing. And so the other response was that I had a really full session for my talk. It was just a brief presentation. It was called Why Media Voices Matter, the Impact of Decult. And it was more like a sort of run through before I showed the doco of what we've been doing, and focusing really on the strength of our, I guess, sort of media output on social media, the newsletter, which I know you guys read every time, right? Everyone can subscribe to it on decult.net.
We do. I get the copies twice. I get one for myself and one from the chair email. So I'm reading it twice.
No, but I mean, don't want to blow my own trumpet too much, but it really is the only one of its kind here from our part of the world. And we do include, some culture news sometimes from other, across the borders as well. But it's a good way of sort of staying in touch with what's happening here, if you're interested in events or want to know also what's come out in the media. And then obviously the media work that I do by behind the scenes, actually quite a lot. That's not usually anything that anyone sees, but I do pitch a lot of stories to journalists in New Zealand and in Australia, where I know of someone who I think has a story, or I see a story, or I know something about a cult, where I just I'm just not, I don't have capacity to start an investigation myself, but I know maybe someone who is employed with a news agents and news organization and they have lawyers and so on, and the right platform, they can take it up. So I've got my contacts, and people also often come to me with their stories. I can't always help them. It's a shame. A lot of people put their hopes sort of in me or in Decult, but sometimes also in me as a journalist, because they've read my book, Cult Trip, and they think, oh, wow, Anke should know my story, and she's the one who understands this, and it's so disappointing. I mean, it's heartbreaking sometimes that I can't be the to-go-to person for those people. I can try and put my journalist hat on and connect someone if I think there is something to it, but even that has its limits. And you would have seen that and hopefully appreciate it. It is also speaking about how our cults here in New Zealand, how they show up in the media, right? And we have some good examples and some not so good examples. And for instance, at the ICSA conference, I spoke about the Jehovah's Witness Convention.
Yeah.
That happened in Auckland earlier this year, and how, it was across the board, RNZ, TVNZ, and the Herald, they all ran these big fluff pieces about how great that was, for the city and the economy and so many tourists, because Jehovah's Witness, they bring like 30,000 visitors to their city. It's a massive convention. And there wasn't one critical word, the C word, the word cult, or anything, slightly, on that spectrum, never came up. I thought, wow, how can they, obviously a business desk, or how could they completely miss that? And I even filed complaints back then with some of the media organizations. So I spoke about that, also highlighting that we're trying to be a bit of a watchdog in that regard. And we've also actively, helped to highlight things that then ended up in the media. For instance, Falun Gong, the awful meditation cult from China, and their dance troupe Shen Yun. They were touring here again, as they do, every year or so, in Auckland, and no one's ever really made the connection that this is actually a performance by a cult that actually exploits its own members. And
it's always interesting because there was actually really big overseas investigations into Shenyun by the New York Times, which included New Zealand citizens
who
were involved in that. And then it's not, it doesn't even make a blip in our media.
Well, just to be fair, because the New York Times investigation, there was a series, and that was just starting or had just come out. They had been the first pieces, and that helped us then here to notify the New Zealand Herald, and Mike Mora picked it up, and then one of our fantastic volunteers, Jaya, who is a Jaya Mangalam Gibson, who now runs the Uncult peer support group for cult survivors in Christchurch, and he also is behind a new podcast called Unspun. So great guy on our team, and he's a Falun Gong survivor. And so I got him into the Herald with an interview, and then they also found one of the former dancers there. So they did their own little investigation on the back of, maybe feeling also legally safer that there was also the New York Times story. And then there was more coming up with the New York Times, and get this, there's a documentary underway. So Jaya has been filmed, and hopefully we're going to see the Falun Gong documentary next year or so. It's going to be on one of the major platforms. So that's all exciting. That's awesome. There's a lot happening in the film world. I can tell you at ICSA, I also ran into a film team that have just been making a documentary, I think it's 3 parts, about TM, Transcendental Meditation, right? So lots of shows on the way. And then I also learned that only we say docos and Americans don't say docos. It's one of those cute, shorter words we use in New Zealand, right?
So you confused a whole bunch of people in America by saying doco, and they had no idea what you were talking about.
I thought it's a standard term, So, no, documentary.
Or doc.
The doc.
So I guess then my follow-on question then is, because ICSA is this rich, vibrant playground of ideas and things that people can borrow from New Zealand to take elsewhere, and that we can borrow from international to try to apply in New Zealand, what were some things that you picked up that you think actually maybe we should be working on in our own country?
Yeah, 2 ideas that I came back with. One is that I think we desperately need here in New Zealand. And just to give some context for those who don't know what that is, they might have heard of deprogrammers. That's a bit of an old-fashioned term, but also it stands for something that's not really done anymore. If you get someone out of a cult, back in the days, sometimes it involved kidnapping and actual coercion and locking someone in a room for 3 days and then you deprogram them. Well, that sounds like reverse brainwashing and is not great, even though some people claim it has helped them. But what's more commonly done these days, thank goodness, is intervention. And Patrick Ryan, who is on our Decult committee, he's one of the probably the best or most well-known interventionists, together with his partner Joe Kelly, and they are very involved with ICSA as well. And unfortunately, we don't have people like that in our part of the world. But I know of enough desperate people who wish they would know who could help them and who they could consult and pay to somehow help them get a family member out of a cult. And this need has been exploited here too, in our part of the world. I know of, got to be careful here, of a well-known international expert who has done some botched interventions, because you can't always guarantee the outcome, of course. But then people are desperate and they often pay a lot of money and someone's got a big name, and it's an unregulated business, right?
Absolutely. And particularly for people who are members of the Unification Church or the Moonies, that was really a really big source of money for deprogrammers. And families would bring in these unregulated people from the US.
Overseas, from the US, exactly. And paid tons of money and
not work. And it not work.
And it did not work. And then there's no accountability. So I've heard enough stories, and they're not just rumors. I know, from someone who was part of an intervention, and she's not a cult apologist, so it's not someone who's trying to defame an expert. So it is, it's a field with a interesting history, and there's a big need here in New Zealand and Australia, because we don't have these people here. I mean, we barely have cult counselors, but that's slowly changing. Also, thanks to Olive Leaf Network and our conference, and Gilly Jenkinson coming here last year from the US and UK and training some people, and now Rachel Bernstein doing the same. So one idea is, and I'm already floating this with the KIP network, the Cult Informed Professionals Network, is if there's interest to get some kind of training going for people here, probably therapists or mediators or counselors or social workers who would be keen to have some training as internists, then Pat Ryan and Joe Kelly and probably a few others who are involved with interventions, they would like to put something together and offer an online training. So that's great. And the other thing that oh my God, there was so much good input from ICSA, but another thing that really stuck for me was also campus recruitment. Because that's across the board, across the world, university students, first semesters, there is a lot of recruitment going on at orientation week, when a lot of new clubs and groups, they present themselves on campus. And you find anything there from Arise Church to whatnot, mega churches in the mix. How would anyone know as a student, especially if it's sort of approved by the university, that there could be a problematic group? And then also some of the really aggressive Korean Bible cults there, they recruit on campus. We know enough tragic stories of young people disappearing into these groups. It's tragic, it's heartbreaking. And then we're actually going to have someone at our conference who is a quite well-known Australian author, has written a book about it, and she's going to talk about that too. So the idea here for our peers or anyone who has some understanding of cult recruitment and cult tactics and has a good connection with a university, talk to the universities. Put yourself forward to give them some input so that they then again can basically do their due diligence to make students aware. They give students all this info at the beginning of the term about consent, which is great, about I guess, mental health and physical health and all the things they need to know entering university, besides the, curriculum and learning and all that. And I think cult education, cult awareness should really be one of it. I think it's been neglected here in New Zealand. There's a lot of ignorance and oblivion still. So yeah, let's change that. That's definitely something I'm fired up about that.
I guess one thing I look at as a way to approach universities is because so many cults and groups actually or potentially rent space out of the university. So maybe they are the vegan restaurant on your campus, or, how it used to be around Canterbury. Some of the Christian youth organizations had buildings within the campus vicinity.
Speaking of vegan restaurants, that are run by cults, because we have one here in Christchurch called the Lotus Heart. 3 chinmoyas behind it. Yeah, you can, there's enough information out there to back up that I'm saying they're a cult. But speaking of vegan restaurants or businesses, that's another idea. And I think we need really good legal advice. And maybe some people say, look, we can do this together. But how about we had some kind of directory or a list or something of businesses in New Zealand, from restaurants to tire services to gardening businesses from the exclusive brethren or so, that are run by cults. Because a lot of people now have cult awareness. They don't want to support cults, but they often don't even know that their money is going directly to a cult. And I'm not just speaking about, the meditation class or the yoga course or that's linked to a dodgy group, but actually just goods that you buy or services that you buy. There are a lot of businesses, especially run by the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church or Exclusive Brethren, that are cult businesses. Now, it could be legally tricky, register like a list like that, but hey, let's think big. And the other idea, which I'm getting excited about, and who knows, maybe that's the future for Decult, is the Decult Film Festival. An international traveling film festival, a bit similar maybe to the Banff Film Festival. Yeah, something like that, because there is, docos or documentaries are such a powerful thing. And there's so much out there. And it could even be something where we put a call out and say, send us your short film, or like a 48-hour film festival around a culty topic or so. Yeah, lots of ideas, lots of creative ideas. I'm not short of those. It's always like, how do we get them all done?
But, or maybe this is an opportunity to partner with the New Zealand International Film Festival to have a section, because those are films that'll travel all across the country. So having a section regarding cults and coercive groups as a way, as a means of education and information sharing.
So what I really appreciated also at ICSA was they put out a little booklet with stories from cult survivors and art, some really amazing, beautiful artwork in there. So there was quite a bit of that at the ICSA conference as well. They had some more sort of practically minded sessions, one about EMDR, because that seems to be very successful with complex PTSD from cult trauma. And also they had one session about sleep, which I first didn't really make the connection, but apparently sleep deprivation is such a big thing in cults, obviously, and then also in your recovery process to basically sort of gain your sleep back.
So EMDR is an interesting one. Certainly, the skeptical viewpoint is not that it's efficacious, but more that it's pseudoscientific. So yeah, interesting that there would be a talk about it and claims that it was being used successfully.
Yeah, look, I'm sure there would also have been some people in the mix at ICSA who would question its origins, and same is true for internal family systems that has had its critics. So, and as I said, I appreciate that there isn't only like one approach fits all approach, if one size fits all approach, but that
absolutely.
People can offer different things as long as they're not, snake oil or, completely dodgy and it's, who helps us, right? And look, I didn't even go to the EMDR session, but I just wanted to highlight that they were also offering these small practical sessions, and also one about art therapy. There's quite a focus on the sort of healing through the arts and stuff. And I like that. So it wasn't just another paper, another academic, insight, which is also super important. Some of these academic insights are exactly what we need more of. Oh my God, I could go on and on about cult conferences because I'm all fired up and think they are actually great. I'm also excited about your conference coming up, by the way, where, if you want to plug that.
We'll plug that at the end.
No, I'm impressed. I think she's doing a better job of advertising our conference than we probably do.
I paid quite a bit. I put quite a lot of work into those Facebook ads. Thank you very much.
Because you are having it at Turanga, the library where we held the first Decult conference. So, I love that space, and I think you made a good choice there. Yeah, that's a beautiful venue. And also, I already know that you have Liz Gregory from the Gloriavale Support Trust in the program. So we're going to get a bit of cult content again, which I think is fantastic. Yeah.
And I think maybe that's actually probably a really good segue, because this past 2 months have been really big for cult news, such as Tulsi Gabbard resigning from her position because her husband, who's a New Zealander, has become unwell, amongst other things happening in Tulsi's career. Bill Gothard had a heart attack.
So sad to hear.
Yeah.
So sad.
Crocodile tears here.
All the stuff that happened with the Sons of the Holy Redeemer, and there's been some big news regarding these traditional Catholic sects, particularly with the excommunication of the St. Pius X group and all these bishops that they falsely ordained. By talking about Liz, is that there has been this new subgenre, this particular subgenre, world famous in New Zealand, of documentaries about Gloriavale, and there's been a new one, Devotion, Obedience, or Betrayal.
Yeah, that was the original title on Paramount Plus, and now they've renamed it a little bit for TV3, for 3 Now, and it's Devotion, the Gloriavale story. That's what it's called now, right? Yeah.
Right, so I guess for a homegrown audience, they'll know Gloriavale. The name makes more sense.
As if we could not tell from, the uniform that they're wearing on the cover. And Anke, I mean, what were people have read my thoughts in the newsletter, but what have been your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would love to hear yours too, but no, I had a really mixed reaction to it. Look, it's the third docu-series, right? We had the really awful one, A Woman's Place, back then, 2016-17, which was basically just a cult propaganda whitewash, should have never been made and should have never been taxpayer funded. I think it has disappeared from TVNZ, but it's still somewhere out there on Amazon Plus, totally sugar-coated, everything that's problematic and abusive at Gloriavale. And then we had a really good one on TVNZ a couple of years ago by Natalie Markham, who also spoke at Decult, and that's called Escaping Utopia, 3 parts, and that series also took us to India, where Gloriavale had a spin-off,
that was a
community.
Really see that coming.
I've researched quite a bit about Gloriavale and met many Gloriavale leavers for my book, and I thought I kind of seen and heard it all, but the India part, wow, that was like next level awful. So, and then was another pretty good documentary. It didn't run, I'm not sure if it actually was on TV, and I've forgotten the title of it, but it's just like a 90-minute, I think, documentary about...
I think that one was just called Gloriavale. I think that was just the name. One word, I think.
And also a couple of YouTubers have done some really great documentaries as well about Gloriavale, like Fundy Fridays. Yeah. Oh, there's another one who's donating money to the Leavers Trust.
So you're right. So we had no shortage of, screen coverage of it. But what the new doco, I mean, it's a scoop in that sense that they actually were the first TV crew or documentary crew to be welcomed back to Gloriavale since that awful 2016, cult propaganda documentary. And you kind of wonder at what price. So I'm a bit suspicious of that, not necessarily because it's made by the queen of trash TV, Julie Christie, but... I mean, look, where to start? Okay, let's start first with how it was framed, even just in their advertising, in their promotion on social media. Taglines like they call it a faith, and some other people call it a cult. I'm like, nah. It's not like some people call it a cult. I mean, if we can accept that cults exist, they're not just we think they're cults. Cults do exist, and we know what they are. And there's no doubt, I mean, that Gloriavale is a cult. There's hardly a cult anywhere in the world. It's more textbook cookie cutter cult than Gloriavale. It's like so stereotypical. It's yeah.
Also, one of the opening scenes or opening frames is like, this is a community under siege.
Yeah, under siege. All of that, So, yeah, let's go into all that, Bronwyn. You're absolutely right. The whole framing was that, the lawyer who's fighting them, Brian Henry, he was called a zealot. I mean, I know that there are people at Gloriavale actually called zealot. So, the zealots are really in Gloriavale. And so that's the whole framing of this is a community under siege, people hating on them, they can't live their faith, now we're going to hear from them, yeah? And then you get, they gave so much airtime and unchallenged sort of platform to leaders from at Gloriavale to present themselves as if they're reformed, everything's fine. They downplayed the massive, the scale of ongoing, abuse, as if this is all in the past. And no one actually came in with the hard facts and said, yeah, nah. And then the most disturbing thing was this young girl. How old was she? Maybe. She was definitely underage.
She's 15. I think she was maybe 15.
Right? Poster child for... if you've grown up there, you are indoctrinated from birth. If you've been selected to speak on behalf of your cult in front of a camera, of course you cannot... if you even know what you're thinking, if you even have your own thoughts at that stage, but you would not be able to express them freely. That for me was really disturbing. I thought this was instrumentalizing a child for cult propaganda from a cult that has a shocking history of child sexual abuse. That really felt so off. Look, they had some good people in there. They had some good, some great voices from survivors. So from a journalistic standpoint, sort of respect to who they got involved and all the interviews and especially all the footage they had, that was fascinating. But it left a really bad aftertaste, especially if this is a documentary that's going to be watched outside of New Zealand, where people don't maybe really understand what Gloriavale is. They don't really know of the court cases and everything that we know here. And they see more, another fascinating Christian community. But they can't, they live there in the bush, but they can't really be who they are because some lawyers and zealots want to take them down.
And when you see documentaries like Gloriavale, which really kind of focus on Sharon Reddy, who is being, who wants to stay in the community but is being evicted and has sort of been living sort of transient around the various abandoned buildings on the property. Then there is, as you mentioned before, Escaping Utopia. Like, this documentary does not do justice to, as we've just talked about, the spin-off community in India, which is essentially trafficking, in my opinion. Let's not sugarcoat that, as well as how Sharon Reddy's daughter died,
I spoke to Virginia Courage, who had watched the doco before it came out, and we both watched it, and she made some pretty strong comments. She was shocked and she was appalled, and so were quite a few former Gloriavale members who've watched this, and we've seen some of their voices in the media. I was really taken aback when I saw an interview with Julie Christie in RNZ, where she was asked in the end whether she thinks it's a cult, and I don't remember the exact words, but it was along the lines of, I'm not quite sure, I don't really know. And I thought, hang on, you are producing this documentary and you don't know whether this is a cult or not? You should have not been given any funding for this. It just feels so irresponsible. There is, all this, but this BS about balance and two sides. There isn't really a balance if one side is a gulag that labor traffics and has slave labor and rampant child sexual abuse and hasn't done the accountability and haven't reformed themselves or kicked their leaders out and so on. And the other side are the victims of that cult. I mean, that's not like a false equivalence or something of balance.
Yeah.
That just doesn't work like that.
I think for me, the risk they took was obviously to get Gloriavale people to speak up and be on camera. The idea was that they were doing damage control. They were trying to fix their reputation. And, to agree to that, there's always going to be a risk. But I think what the producers could have done is they could have said, every time we have someone from Gloriavale putting out spin, saying something, we need to immediately counter that with people that explain why it's wrong or why they can't be trusted. And that's what they didn't do. They let Gloriavale people say something, and then it just went unchallenged, just left hanging there as if you should believe it.
I came away so confused, actually, particularly from the last 5 minutes of the second episode and the third episode. That's really the only parts of this entire series that I felt was kind of any interest to people watching who know about Gloriavale. You don't need the first episode, and you really don't need much of the second. I came away quite confused as to the stance of the producers in the end, because they gave so much time to Gloriavale, as you mentioned, Mark, but while they selected their most well-spoken members, they didn't really speak well. I remember the end of the second episode, and they're going through the cemetery, which, despite being around since 1991, only has maybe about 20 people buried. Yeah, which I'm like, that's kind of small. That's not a lot. But anyways, you had the new overseeing shepherd, Stephen Standfast, who was there, and he's like, because most people weren't there or don't know about the events or the things that Hopeful did, we don't really talk about it. After giving a whole spiel about we need to learn from the past and just saying, we're not going to talk about this. And it's like you're now just creating problems for yourself, 10, 20 years down the road. And when they had Noah kind of look at one of these old huts, and Noah is pulling out some very ICSA-like verbiage there. We don't really believe in the concept of victims because our belief is that things happen to you and you overcome them through Christ. And what do we know from ICSA? That belief that if you don't have victims, if there's no such thing as victimhood, how can you have a perpetrator?
And how can you have accountability and all of that? And I mean, I'm just remembering two problematic aspects. One was that they spoke about the Gloriavale PR people, leaders, spoke about the marriage counseling, or they called something marriage counseling. I'm like, what the actual? It was sexual abuse. where Neville could hope for Christian, he was kind of demonstrating to these young couples and sometimes even teenagers how to do it, how to have sex. And he basically manipulated people. It was gross, and it was abusive, and it was totally inappropriate, not from a moral, but from a legal standpoint. I mean, there were so many sexual transgressions in this so-called marriage preparation. He went to jail because he raped a woman with a wooden object as part of her marriage counseling preparation, whatever, we're talking about. It's shocking. Yeah.
And these are things that were addressed in earlier documentaries.
Yeah.
Like, there was dramatization of this sort of counseling.
And it was mentioned briefly in this one as well, but I think it was mentioned and then they let Gloriavale have their say afterwards. So Gloriavale had the last word on that one, which again, it's the wrong way round.
It was totally the wrong way around, Mark. And also, do you remember how the Gloriavale guys spoke about these little containers or huts or so that you saw there for counselors, and how dismissive they were of that, and how they were basically making it pretty clear that they weren't happy with that. Then I thought, okay, well, now you've shown us your true colors, because all you talk about reformed and all in the past, but then you actually don't want to have anyone there who's keeping maybe kids safe, or giving, even I don't know the ins and outs, how that works, of having counselors there on the site. But the fact that Gloriavale was so dismissive of that didn't look very helpful to me, that they are truly reformed and working with the authorities to stop these kind of abuses. Yeah, we need to talk about it. It's going to be interesting, how it sort of plays out, and if people also take action. I know of someone who's a victim advocate, and he wants to file complaints and so on. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more pushback and more discussion about it. I really hope so. I think in this day and age, there's no excuse for this kind of,
like 10, 15 years ago, right? Whitewash was the thing that was being done. But in this day and age, with the entire history laid bare in the media, to then produce a documentary that is this naive, it's gobsmacking.
I've really felt for Cheerful. She was a 15-year-old that they interviewed.
Yeah.
Again, as we mentioned, she was weaponized, but also she has this faith that being in this community with her family is safer than being outside the community or being out in the city. And yet you have the adults of Gloriavale, these senior leaders, saying, well, nobody can protect the children of Gloriavale, not outside, not inside. He does say this. Like, I think it was Luke Valor who might have said it. And I feel for that child. She has such faith.
Yeah. I think that was after they said that, was it 15 out of the 60 adult men had basically been accused of sexual abuse, which is a rate far above what happens out in the community.
And that's why I say I'm so confused. There's a framing of this is a community under siege. Everyone else is against it and trying to take it down and destroy the community. And we are bleeding them dry of money with all these lawsuits. And then, you just let Gloriavale speak in a way that is not flattering, and then end on a note that says, no, we should just let them live as they want to live.
Oh, that Bronwyn, you heard me last night at Skeptics in the Pub ranting about it, but giving Phil the last word and him saying we should just let them be, that was such a bad decision to make. Like, editorially, that is not the way to end a 3-part series, saying that we should leave them alone. Ugh, horrible.
I think we've really kind of purged our spirits of this terrible documentary at just the right time to go into Membership Corner and say our final goodbyes. So I think we really don't have too much to talk about this week. Hopefully our scholarship winners will find out within the next week as to whether they are getting their free tickets to our conference. So good luck to all who apply. In terms of Skeptics in the Pub, our next one will be on July 25th in Wellington at the Intercontinental Hotel, and that all kicks off at 6 p.m. We are still selling tickets for our conference. Visit our website, conference.skeptics.nz, and follow the link to our Humanitics page. And not only can you buy tickets to our weekend conference, you can now buy tickets to our Saturday night canapes That event starts at 6:30 on Saturday. And we are also taking RSVPs for our Friday night mixer. The Friday night mixer is free. You don't need to attend the conference to RSVP for that event and also for the canapé event either.
But it sounds posh. Canapés is a really posh word. I'm hoping that every waiter's going to have a bow tie and is going to call me sir, because that's what I expect when I hear canapés.
I'm pretty sure Victoria Food Services will put on a pretty good spread for us. So I am looking forward to that. Anke, do you want to do a final plug for the Decult conference and the new ticket sales?
So our conference after yours is going to be from the 24th to 25th of October in Christchurch at the Town Hall upstairs. Larger venue than last time, and tickets go live in a week. Early bird tickets, you snooze, you lose, go and grab yours. We also have concession tickets for students and community card holders, and we have online tickets because the whole event will be live streamed and you can watch all the sessions, all the recordings later too. And those tickets will all go live on the 20th of July, or if you pre-register now on decult.net, have a look, then you can even get early access to these early bird tickets. Was that a good plug?
It was a great plug.
Yeah.
On the Sunday of our conference, which will be August 2nd, we are going to be hosting our AGM. If you are interested in joining the committee, just give us an email at committee@skeptics.nz and we'll let you know what kind of projects we have in mind and where we'd love to fit you in.
We're always looking for new blood. We're not vampires, but we could really do with new people who have a little bit of get up and go, are willing to get stuck in and help out. And Bronwyn, you have a thought that maybe for the next year and a half we're gonna try and do a real focus on getting a whole bunch of stuff done, right?
Yeah, I think it's really time for us to get back in touch with who we are as skeptics, doing some more activities. You know, we love our newsletter, we love our podcast, but now it's time to, get out there with some skeptical education, do some other output.
I want to go out there and be a menace. I want to cause problems. I want to complain. I want to do my activism again and get people in trouble.
Write all your complaints to the ASA.
I haven't done one in a couple of years now, maybe.
Yep. So, we have some pretty good ideas. We're just still in some planning phases, but if you have an idea for us, we'd love to hear from you. So again, email us at committee@skeptics.nz. And that's it for us for this fortnight. If you have any comments, queries, questions, kudos, or concerns, please email us at news@skeptics.nz or podcast@skeptics.nz. That's it for this episode of the Anna podcast. Thank you again so much, Anke, for stepping up.
Thanks so much for having me. It's always fun with you guys.
You were a worthy replacement for Katrina.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have you back at any time.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And we'll be back with more skeptical news in 14 days. Ka kite.
See ya.
Yeah. Bye. Bye.